Have you ever found peace in silence while the world around you buzzes with noise? Have you ever been told you're too quiet, too reserved, or too independent as you've aged? Let me tell you something few understand. Your solitude may be your superpower. Welcome to Buddhist Mindfulness, a channel devoted to uncovering the inner harmony of aging, using the gentle wisdom of Buddhism and the firm clarity of science. In today's deeply personal journey, we will explore 7 powerful personality traits common in seniors who prefer solitude, and how these traits contribute to a longer, more meaningful, and happier life. This isn't just about being alone. It's about understanding that solitude is not emptiness. It is presence. It is not loneliness. It is freedom. In a world that constantly demands connection, interaction, and performance, there is something radical and healing about simply being. Through real stories of seniors who have found joy in simplicity, scientific research on mental and physical well-being, and timeless Buddhist teachings about inner stillness, you'll discover why solitude may not be something to avoid, but something to cherish deeply. You're not too quiet. You're deeply aware. You're not too reserved. You're wisely selective. You're not too independent. You're wonderfully self-sufficient. Let's begin. Part 1. Deep Thinkers, the Inner Architects of Meaning. There's a quiet nobility in those who choose solitude not as an escape, but as a sanctuary, a place where the mind can stretch, wander, and finally rest. Seniors who thrive in solitude are not withdrawing from life. They are engaging with it more profoundly than ever before. These are the inner architects of meaning, the deep thinkers who build entire worlds within, shaping their inner landscapes with thought, memory, and reflection. Neuroscience has shown us that solitude is not an empty space, but rather a deeply active state. When the mind is not focused on the outside world, it often turns inward, activating what scientists call the default mode network, DMN. This network is responsible for introspection, autobiographical memory, and self-referential thought. In other words, the very core of our personal identity and meaning-making system. For seniors, engaging this network through regular reflection, journaling, or simply quiet contemplation can enhance emotional regulation, decision-making, and cognitive resilience. In fact, studies have found that older adults who maintain a reflective practice tend to score higher on measures of wisdom, empathy, and even mental clarity. When we reflect deeply, especially in the absence of external distraction, we create new associations, reinterpret past experiences, and develop insights that are uniquely our own. The brain, far from deteriorating in solitude, often flourishes, rewiring itself, creating coherence, and finding peace in patterns of thought. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha speaks of mindfulness of thought, a practice that invites individuals to observe their mental processes without judgment. In Buddhist philosophy, thinking isn't something to be feared or silenced, but rather witnessed with clarity and compassion. Solitude, then, becomes not a punishment, but a practice, a sacred opportunity to turn the light of awareness inward. This inner turning is what transforms solitude into meditation. You don't have to sit on a cushion in a temple to practice this. Many seniors, whether they realize it or not, are living in meditation when they sit quietly on their porch, watch the trees sway, or recall stories from their past with gentle curiosity. In Buddhism, this kind of contemplative solitude is often considered fertile ground for developing vipassana, or insight. It's not about detaching from the world, but about seeing it more clearly, stripping away the noise and illusions to glimpse the truth beneath. In today's world, silence is rare. Our culture thrives on notifications, background noise, endless conversation, and external validation. We are taught to fear quietness, as if stillness implies something is wrong. But for many seniors, solitude isn't loneliness, it's liberation. To sit quietly with one's thoughts is, in many ways, a quiet rebellion against this culture of overstimulation. It's a return to what matters, a sacred act of choosing presence over performance. In solitude, you are no longer a role to be fulfilled or a title to be carried. You are simply yourself, a soul with a history, a heart with memories, and a mind capable of building bridges between the past and the present. Those who embrace deep thinking in later life often carry a serene authority. They have listened to the noise of the world and chosen instead the music of their own mind. These individuals are the keepers of meaning, the weavers of wisdom. They are less interested in small talk and more drawn to conversations about legacy, values, the soul's journey. Their insights are not hurried. They have aged like fine wine, distilled through decades of experience, loss, triumph, and change. And yet, they are not rigid. Deep thinkers are fluid, constantly revisiting their assumptions, reframing old wounds, and seeking truth beneath the surface of appearances. They are still learning, not from textbooks or news feeds, but from silence, from patterns, from nature, from the act of sitting with themselves and asking gently, what am I learning today? To be a deep thinker in one's senior years is to live with intention. It is to honor your thoughts not as burdens, but as blessings. It is to find wisdom not outside, but within. Whether through science, spiritual practice, or simple daily reflection, seniors who think deeply are not fading into the background. They are illuminating the path forward for themselves and for those wise enough to listen. Part 2, Emotionally Independent, the Wellspring Within. Emotional independence doesn't mean detachment, it means balance. It's not about shutting the world out or rejecting love and companionship. Rather, it's the quiet strength of knowing that your sense of self-worth doesn't rise and fall with other people's opinions. For seniors, cultivating this form of inner stability becomes increasingly vital. As children grow up, spouses pass away, and social circles shrink, the ability to remain centered emotionally is no longer just a spiritual ideal. It becomes a practical necessity. Emotionally grounded seniors are like trees with deep roots. They remain unshaken during life's storms because their stability comes from within. These individuals don't rely on constant external validation to feel whole. They may enjoy company, but they don't fear solitude. They appreciate compliments, but their identity is not tied to praise. Their emotional well-being is self-regulated, not outsourced. This concept of inner emotional balance is more than a philosophical ideal. It's deeply supported by science. The Harvard Study of Adult Development, one of the longest longitudinal studies in history, has found that while close relationships are indeed important for happiness, emotional regulation and inner peace are even stronger predictors of longevity and life satisfaction in old age than the sheer number of social interactions. In other words, it's not about how many people you have around you, but how emotionally stable and resilient you are within yourself. When you've reached emotional independence, you're no longer ruled by the need to be liked or understood by everyone. Your peace isn't contingent on circumstances going your way. You stop chasing the highs of attention or the constant reassurance from others, and in doing so, you begin to conserve your emotional energy. That conservation, in turn, supports better sleep, lower cortisol levels, and reduced risk of stress-related illnesses. It's not just emotional wisdom, it's a form of preventive health care. In Buddhist philosophy, this emotional independence is beautifully mirrored in the concept of upekkha, often translated as equanimity. Upekkha teaches us to remain centered in the face of both praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain. It is not cold indifference, but rather a mature form of love that does not cling. It is the ability to love someone deeply, to care profoundly, and yet not be consumed by the outcome. The emotionally independent elder becomes like the bodhisattva who walks through life offering compassion without attachment, kindness without conditions. This spiritual maturity does not arise overnight. It is cultivated through reflection, meditation, and life experience. It is the fruit of understanding anicca, impermanence, anatta, non-self, and the futility of grasping for permanence in a world that constantly changes. When you've reached emotional independence, you're no longer ruled by the need to be liked or understood by everyone. Your peace isn't contingent on circumstances going your way. You stop chasing the highs of attention or the constant reassurance from others, and in doing so, you begin to conserve your emotional energy. That conservation, in turn, supports better sleep, lower cortisol levels, and reduced risk of stress-related illnesses. It's not just emotional wisdom, it's a form of preventive healthcare. In Buddhist philosophy, this emotional independence is beautifully mirrored in the concept of upekkha, often translated as equanimity. Upekkha teaches us to remain centered in the face of both praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain. It is not cold indifference, but rather a mature form of love that does not cling. It is the ability to love someone deeply, to care profoundly and yet not be consumed by the outcome. The emotionally independent elder becomes like the bodhisattva who walks through life offering compassion without attachment, kindness without conditions. This spiritual maturity does not arise overnight. It is cultivated through reflection, meditation, and life experience. It is the fruit of understanding anicca, impermanence, anatta, non-self, and the futility of grasping for permanence in a world that constantly changes. To be emotionally independent is not to be alone. It is to be free, free from the chains of emotional volatility, free from the burden of unmet expectations, and free to experience life with equanimity. This is the gift of age when wisdom is embraced, the ability to drink from the wellspring within, and to know that no matter what happens on the outside, you are enough. And in that knowing, there is peace. Part 3, highly observant, masters of the unspoken. There's a quiet wisdom that emerges in those who choose solitude, not as a retreat from life, but as a deeper engagement with it. Seniors who embrace solitude often become masters of observation, not just of things that are said, but more importantly, of the things left unsaid. They become finely tuned to the subtle energies in a room, the tone beneath the words, and even the smallest shift in another's emotional state. They begin to see not just with the eyes, but with the heart. Recent studies in neuroscience have confirmed what ancient contemplatives have known for centuries: stillness sharpens the mind. Older adults who regularly engage in mindfulness meditation, particularly those who practice focused attention or vipassana-style observation, display greater activity in brain regions responsible for empathy, emotional regulation, and perceptual accuracy. In one study, seniors who had meditated consistently for over 8 weeks showed enhanced neural responsiveness to subtle emotional cues, such as micro-expressions or shifts in vocal intonation. This means they could sense when someone was distressed, even if the person said nothing. Their brains had been trained through years of contemplative observation to notice the quiet signals others miss. Moreover, these seniors often demonstrate what psychologists call empathic accuracy, the ability to accurately infer another person's emotional state. It's not magic. It's the result of years of practice, tuning inward, calming the chatter, and learning to be fully present. In Buddhist tradition, this heightened observation is not merely a cognitive skill. It is a doorway to liberation. The word vipassana means insight or clear seeing. But this clarity isn't limited to what the eyes behold. Vipassana invites us to observe the nature of our own mind, to witness how thoughts arise and fade, how emotions bloom and dissolve, and how nothing, absolutely nothing, is permanent. An elderly monk once said, "When you truly see the impermanence in a falling leaf or the sorrow behind a forced smile, compassion flows naturally." Seniors who spend time in solitude often begin to see in this way. They observe not only the world outside, but the unfolding landscape within. They recognize the patterns of their own attachments, regrets, joys, and fears. And from this recognition comes a deep empathy for others, because they have seen it all in themselves. This is the wisdom of the silent elder sitting at the back of the room. They may say little, but their gaze is piercing. They listen more than they speak. And when they do speak, their words come from a place of deep presence. In today's world, attention is the rarest commodity. Notifications, headlines, voices, all competing for our awareness. But in solitude, that competition fades. Attention, once scattered, begins to settle like dust in a sunbeam. And in that stillness, a different kind of vision emerges. Seniors who have learned to live peacefully in their own company often become profoundly attuned, not because they're trying to read people, but because they've stopped needing to speak. They've discovered that much of what matters in life isn't spoken aloud. A subtle glance, a pause before a sentence, a change in breath. These are the languages they now understand. There is a quiet power in becoming a master of the unspoken. These individuals walk into a room and sense its emotional temperature. They know who is hurting, who is pretending, and who is truly present. And they meet all of it with compassion, not judgment. Their lives are a testament to the idea that true observation is not about analysis, but about connection. They do not observe others to evaluate them. They observe to see them, to honor their presence. It's no wonder that being around such individuals often feels comforting, even healing. To grow older and more observant is not to become detached, it is to become more deeply aware. With every passing year, the noise of the world grows fainter and the soul's whispers grow clearer. The desire to prove oneself fades and the desire to understand arises. In Buddhism, mindfulness isn't just about focus, it is about loving awareness. Seniors who dwell in silence and mindfulness offer the world a profound gift: the ability to see without staring, to hear without interrupting, and to understand without speaking. In their quietude, they carry the wisdom of the unspoken. They are the keepers of invisible truths, the gentle observers who remind us that stillness is not emptiness, but clarity. Part 4: Selective with Relationships. Guardians of Energy. As people age, something profound begins to shift in the way they engage with others. Seniors who choose solitude are not necessarily lonely, they are often simply more selective. This selectivity isn't a retreat from life, but a wise and intentional redirection of energy. They become guardians of their emotional space, choosing fewer relationships, but forming connections that are far more meaningful, nourishing, and deep. Psychological research offers a fascinating lens into this transformation. According to socio-emotional selectivity theory, developed by Stanford psychologist Laura Carstensen, people's goals and priorities change as they become aware of their limited time on Earth. When we are younger, we tend to value novelty, social expansion, and diverse experiences. But as we age, we begin to narrow our focus toward emotionally meaningful relationships, those that truly matter to our inner life and well-being. This shift is not only natural, but also incredibly beneficial. Studies show that older adults who prune their social circles in favor of more emotionally satisfying relationships experience higher life satisfaction, greater emotional stability, and even improved health. Their emotional landscape becomes more serene, not because they have fewer people around, but because the people who remain are more aligned with their soul. In this sense, seniors become curators of connection. They learn to say no without guilt, to avoid draining interactions, and to seek out people who offer mutual respect, kindness, and presence. Their time is precious. Their energy is sacred. Buddhism echoes this wisdom through the teaching of Kalyanamitta, often translated as noble friendship or spiritual companionship. The Buddha himself emphasized the importance of surrounding oneself with companions who support the path to awakening, those who uplift, challenge, and walk alongside us with compassion and sincerity. Kalyanamitta is not about the quantity of friendships, but the quality. It is a reminder that not every smile is sincere, that not every conversation brings clarity, and not every presence soothes the soul. True friends in the Buddhist sense are rare and precious. They do not gossip or flatter. They do not compete or compare. Instead, they nourish your growth like gentle rain on fertile soil. They listen without judgment and speak with honesty. For seniors walking a more spiritual path, these kinds of friendships become sanctuaries. A simple cup of tea shared with an old friend, a quiet walk in the park with a thoughtful companion, or even a few heartfelt words exchanged across long distances. These moments are no longer taken for granted. They are sacred. In modern life, attention is often scattered, divided among endless notifications, shallow conversations, and performative social circles. But as seniors age, they begin to understand something many never realize. Attention is a currency, one of the most valuable forms of energy we possess. And just like money, it can be spent wisely or wasted recklessly. Those who embrace solitude and selectivity are not rejecting connection, they are elevating it. They understand that every interaction leaves an imprint. Every conversation shapes the heart. So they guard their energy like a flame in the wind. They spend their attention not on performances or obligations, but on moments of true resonance. There is something liberating in this. When you no longer feel the need to please everyone or be everywhere, you begin to rediscover the richness of being, of just existing in the presence of someone who truly sees you. These seniors are no longer interested in surface-level friendships or social rituals. They are looking for soul-level companionship, however rare that might be. In doing so, they find something many younger people still chase: peace. Not the peace that comes from having no problems, but the peace that comes from choosing one's company with discernment. It's a quiet, steady kind of joy, a joy rooted not in numbers, but in depth, not in attention, but in authenticity. And perhaps in the end, that's what wisdom looks like. Not isolation, but inner alignment. Not loneliness, but luminous selectivity. To walk through the later years of life, not trying to be everything to everyone, but simply to be true to yourself and to share that truth only with those who honor it. Part 5. Creatively inclined, the inner flame of expression. Creativity doesn't need applause. It needs space. And for many seniors, that space blossoms in solitude. When the noise of external obligations fades, when the rush of proving oneself quiets with age, an unexpected treasure often emerges, the urge to create. It's not about impressing others or chasing recognition anymore. It's about expressing something true, something quietly burning inside. In the later chapters of life, many solitary seniors begin to channel their quiet into beauty. With no need to justify their choices or conform to expectations, they paint, write, sketch, carve, or knit, not for show, but for soul. The external world may have grown still, but inside, the creative flame burns brighter than ever. This isn't merely romanticism, it's science. Studies show that engaging in creative activities significantly boosts dopamine levels, which in turn elevates mood and combats depression. In older adults, this becomes especially vital, as emotional resilience often determines not just mental well-being, but physical longevity. Creative expression also fosters neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, which helps protect against cognitive decline, dementia, and Alzheimer's disease. Silent, hands-on activities like painting, pottery, woodworking, or knitting stimulate fine motor skills and memory, keeping neurons firing in harmony. Unlike passive forms of entertainment, such as watching television, creative work actively engages the brain. It demands concentration, decision-making, color theory, pattern recognition, emotional processing, all wrapped into a deeply personal and satisfying ritual. Furthermore, creativity creates a sense of purpose. A 78-year-old woman painting wildflowers from memory or a 70-year-old man carving a wooden birdhouse is doing more than passing time. They are preserving memory, shaping legacy, and most of all, staying present in the moment. From a Buddhist perspective, creative expression, when practiced with awareness, becomes a profound spiritual act. This isn't about producing a masterpiece. It's about being present in the act of doing. Each brushstroke, each stitch, each tap of the chisel becomes an offering to the now. In Buddhism, this merging of attention and joy is known as samadhi, deep concentration that arises from mindfulness and leads to inner stillness. Creating in silence, without judgment or expectation, allows one to enter this meditative state naturally. Time dissolves, the ego softens, one is simply part of the flow. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "When you are truly present, even washing the dishes can be a sacred act." So too, when a senior creates with mindfulness, their art becomes a form of prayer. It is not about the end product. It is about the harmony between the hands, the heart, and the breath. A drawing made with presence is more powerful than any museum piece done in haste. In youth, we often fear solitude as something empty, a void to be filled. But in old age, solitude can ripen into something sacred. It becomes the soil in which creativity grows. Without the need to perform, to compete, or to meet deadlines, seniors can explore creativity not as a task, but as a form of personal liberation. No longer is the question, is this good? But rather, does this feel true? For the solitary senior, each act of creation becomes a whisper of the soul, a small poem scribbled in a notebook, a hand-stitched quilt made for a grandchild, a melody hummed softly while tending the garden. These are not just hobbies, they are messages, stories, and emotions that could not be expressed any other way. And here's the quiet miracle. Creativity, shared or not, witnessed or not, still heals. It connects the inner world with the outer one. It bridges the past with the present. It brings light to days that may otherwise feel long. And it gives shape to feelings that words cannot contain. Even in the absence of applause, the soul continues to sing. The creative urge is timeless, ageless, and universal. It is the flame that flickers gently within each of us, asking not for praise, but for presence. So if you ever find yourself alone, with only the sound of your breath and the hush of your thoughts, pick up a brush, a pen, a needle, or simply sit and listen. The inner flame is still there, waiting patiently for you to tend it. In solitude, something beautiful can grow. Part 6, Strong Self-Discipline, the silent backbone of strength. In the quiet hours of solitude, when the noise of the world fades into stillness, one thing often remains: the gentle, unwavering rhythm of self-discipline. Unlike external rules or societal expectations, this kind of discipline does not arise from pressure. It is born from within. It is personal, private, powerful. We often think of self-discipline as harsh or inflexible, something associated with punishment, restriction, or a lack of freedom. But for those who have learned to walk the path of wisdom, especially in the later chapters of life, discipline is not a prison. It is a sanctuary. It is not self-denial. It is self-respect in action. Modern research continues to affirm what ancient wisdom has long known. Structure and discipline offer real, tangible benefits for our physical and mental well-being. Older adults who follow a regular daily routine, waking at the same time, eating balanced meals, engaging in movement or mindful activity, demonstrate better outcomes in sleep quality, digestion, mood regulation, and even immune resilience. Studies show that those with consistent habits have lower levels of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, and experience less anxiety overall. Their minds are calmer, their sleep deeper, and their energy more sustainable. But beyond biology, discipline supports a sense of meaning. When each day has structure, even in the absence of career goals or busy social calendars, it helps preserve a sense of agency and dignity. It says, I still matter. My time still matters. In Buddhism, this quiet power of discipline is known as sila, one of the three core pillars of the Eightfold Path. Alongside samadhi, concentration, and panya, wisdom, sila refers to ethical conduct, restraint, and personal commitment to a virtuous life. But sila is not about obeying commandments. It's about living in alignment with your own deeper values. It's the strength to say no to what clouds the mind or harms the heart. It's the clarity to say yes to actions that cultivate peace, compassion, and dignity, not just for others, but for yourself. When practiced sincerely, sila gives rise to inner clarity. It clears away the mental clutter and allows mindfulness to grow. It is, as the Buddha taught, the fertile soil from which concentration and insight bloom. And just as a garden flourishes with regular tending, the soul flourishes under the gentle, unwavering care of self-discipline. To be disciplined is to be devoted, not to perfection, but to consistency. It's not about always feeling motivated or being in control. It's about making the small, often invisible decision to keep showing up, even when you don't feel like it. It's choosing to stretch your body gently each morning, not because anyone will praise you, but because your joints feel better when you do. It's choosing to eat nourishing food, not because anyone is watching, but because you want to live another day in peace and clarity. It's turning off the television before bed, even when loneliness creeps in, because you know your body sleeps more soundly without the noise. In this way, discipline becomes an act of love. A quiet whisper to yourself, I care enough to keep going. I respect this life, even in its solitude. I honor the strength that lives within me. True discipline isn't about control, it's about liberation. It frees us from the chaos of impulse. It releases us from the bondage of bad habits, erratic moods, and reactive living. It grants us space to breathe, to choose, to live intentionally. For elders especially, discipline becomes a companion in a time when so many other roles and responsibilities fall away. The house might be quieter, the phone might ring less, but within, the soul still seeks rhythm. The body still seeks care. The spirit still seeks meaning. Self-discipline offers a structure for this care, a frame for the days that gives the heart something to lean on, a soft but steady backbone that carries you forward, one mindful step at a time. And in the silence of this commitment, something profound awakens, not just strength, but peace. Part 7, Spiritually Grounded, the Still Waters of the Soul. Among all the traits we've explored, this one is the thread that binds them together. It is the quiet undercurrent beneath a long and turbulent river, the silent breath beneath the rush of time. Seniors who are spiritually grounded live from a place of depth. They no longer fear silence. They welcome it. In fact, they crave it like a balm for the noise that once distracted them from their inner peace. In their presence, you can often feel something different. It's not loud or dramatic. It's not even visible in the conventional sense, but it's real. A kind of quiet stillness radiates from them, a rootedness, as if they've finally come to understand something that most people spend a lifetime chasing. This kind of grounding isn't about belonging to a specific religion, though it may include that. It's about having a deep relationship with life itself. It's a state of being where the individual recognizes their place in the grand, mysterious web of existence. It is not built on rigid dogma or external rituals, but on inner realization, forgiveness, and a quiet faith in something larger than oneself. Modern research supports what many ancient traditions have long taught. Spiritual engagement is not only good for the soul, it's good for the body and mind. Studies have shown that older adults who practice some form of spiritual engagement, whether through prayer, meditation, communal worship, or mindful living, tend to experience reduced stress levels, improved immune system function, and greater overall life satisfaction. Spiritual grounding creates a kind of psychological resilience. It helps older adults navigate the inevitable challenges of aging, grief, physical decline, loneliness, not with bitterness, but with grace. It allows them to find meaning in the face of loss and beauty even in the midst of endings. In Buddhist philosophy, this depth of peace is beautifully captured in the teaching of shunyata, or emptiness. At first glance, the word may seem cold or negative, but it is anything but. Shunyata is not a void to fear. It is a space full of potential. It is the silence from which all music emerges, the blank canvas upon which all paintings are born. To understand emptiness is to understand that we are not our possessions, our status, or even our memories. Everything is in a state of change. What remains constant is awareness itself. The spiritually grounded elder understands this deeply. They do not cling. They do not push life away. They accept it as it comes, flowing with its changes like water. This emptiness isn't despair. It's freedom. When you realize that everything is impermanent, you stop holding on so tightly. And in that letting go, you begin to feel weightless, spacious, alive. So what does it look like in the life of a spiritually grounded senior? It may look like a grandmother who sits quietly each morning by the window, sipping tea, watching the light shift across the trees, her heart filled not with longing for the past, but with gratitude for the now. It may look like an old man walking slowly through the garden, touching each leaf as if it were a sacred scripture, pausing to breathe in the scent of blooming jasmine. It may look like someone who, in conversation, listens more than they speak, who doesn't rush to give advice or prove their point, but instead simply holds space. Because they know that sometimes the most healing gift you can give another human being is your calm presence. They don't chase after meaning anymore. They are the meaning. This isn't the retreat of someone who's given up. It's the return of someone who has finally come home. Spiritually grounded elders have nothing to prove. They no longer seek applause or validation. They are content to be. And in being, they radiate something that words can't explain. In their stillness, there is movement. In their silence, there is a symphony. And in their emptiness, there is infinite presence. To be spiritually grounded in old age is not a coincidence. It's a result of living fully, falling, rising, and finally surrendering to something deeper than the surface. These individuals have walked through storms and still found peace. They've let go of what doesn't matter and held fast to what does: love, awareness, compassion, and connection. They have become, in the truest sense, the still waters of the soul. If you resonate with these traits, if you found joy in stillness, purpose in solitude, and connection in silence, you are not broken. You are blooming. You are not retreating from the world, but rather stepping into a deeper dimension of it, one most people are too distracted to notice. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's refinement. It is where the soul finds clarity and the heart remembers its own rhythm. In your quiet moments, you are not lost. You are listening to your breath, to your truth, to the sacred language of life. You are not withdrawing from life. You are connecting to it more deeply than ever before. While others chase applause and noise, you find your strength in presence. And that is a different kind of power, one that cannot be measured, but is deeply felt. The world often celebrates noise, but here at Buddhist Mindfulness, we celebrate the sacred hush between words, because in that space, wisdom grows. Let us know in the comments which trait felt most familiar to you. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you wish to continue this journey with us. Until next time, stay grounded, stay mindful, and remember, the quietest voices often speak the loudest truths.